Welcome, everyone. This is my pleasure to have this webinar today. This 4IP Council's webinar is called Technological Innovation and Economic Growth, a Policy Perspective. My name is Axel Frazzini, and I'm the Managing Director of 4IP Council. I'm your host today. So I believe that you all know what 4IP Council is about, but let me just make it brief. So we are a not-for-profit research organization, and we're focused on the link between IP and innovation. Our mission is to identify the most relevant topics and produce empirical research by collaborating with a variety of academics, experts, and IP organizations. And today, that will be a great example of collaboration. So on our website, you can find plenty of materials. Everything is free, everything is transparent. And for example, we have studies, summaries of relevant papers, recordings of all of our webinars, such as this one. And we have a podcast that is dedicated to innovators, inventions, and we have new episodes posted on a regular basis. We produce an easy to digest content that starts with the number 4 SMEs. That's the specific corner where you can find especially tailored for non-IP experts, SMEs, and startups information about intellectual property rights. We are doing a sustainability special on our IP Stories podcast at the moment. And like today's webinar, this is part of our campaign for the World Intellectual Property Day. And this year, this is about IP and SDGs, building our common future with innovation and creativity. We have also a new area on the website that is very popular. We just launched it a few weeks ago. That's IoT and cellular standards made simple, where you can learn all the benefits of standards and the Internet of Things across different sectors. You should check it out. We have just added last week a new video. Moving on, you can find everything about 4IP Council on the website, but also on social networks. We are on X, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. Our handle is 4IP Council. There you can find everything, but from news to resources to interviews and webinars. Here's the most important part, because without further delay, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Dr. Leo Schmallenbach and Professor Dr. Karin Hoisl. Karin is a full professor of organization and innovation at the University of Mannheim in Germany and part-time professor of economics and management of inventive processes at the Department of Strategy and Innovation at the Copenhagen Business School in Denmark. Moreover, she is a research affiliate at the Max Planck Institute for Innovation and Competition in Munich, in Germany. Leo is an habilitation candidate at the University of Mannheim in Germany. He holds a doctoral degree in management from the University of Mannheim. He is a member of the editorial review board of the Strategic Management Journal and social media editor of Industry and Innovation. Karin and Leo have just finalized a research paper with the same title as this webinar, Technological Innovation and Economic Growth, a Policy Perspective. And the paper will be made available on our website in the research section later this week. But you have the chance today to have the authors that will present the paper, the recommendations and conclusions. You will be able also to find on the website their full biographies. A final remark for the audience: please do not hesitate to use the Q&A tool to submit your questions directly live in this webinar. You can find this section, the Q&A section, at the lower part of your screen, and you can raise your questions anytime during the webinar. We'll take your questions after the presentation in about 30 minutes. Without further ado, Karin, the floor is yours.
So very warm welcome from my side as well. Axel, thank you very much for this kind introduction. So let's talk about our report. So the key question underlying our report is the relationship between technological innovation and economic growth, and in particular the role of intellectual property rights. And here we mainly focus on patents. And here's our agenda. So we start with a few words about the relationship between patents and technological innovation. Then we introduce to you a number of policy instruments, of course, not all of them, but a few, just to give an overview. And these policy instruments, on the one hand, foster research and development, but on the other hand, also intellectual property rights. And then we will talk about our own empirical analysis, and then I will later on hand over to Leo. But now let's start with patents and technological innovation. So we all know that patents provide incentives to invest in research and development. And there are only 3 reasons on this slide, but of course there are many more reasons. So one is that a patent grants an exclusion right to the holder of the patent, which means that if you own a patent, you are allowed to prohibit third parties from using your invention. And this means that hopefully you can create, or you can acquire maybe not the full returns to your investments, but at least the major part of your investments in innovation. And the other thing is that patent documents get published after 18 months. Even though you cannot one by one as a third party copy the invention, but at least you can learn from it and you can build on this knowledge, which then again leads to or provides incentives for own R&D investments. And we call this spillovers. And last but not least, patents also create markets for intellectual property. So technology would be hard to trade without patents, because who would be willing to pay for it if it is publicly available or free of charge? And therefore we need patents which can then be sold or licensed. So what we know is patents lead to R&D, and R&D then foster economic growth. But of course, growing economies also encourage patenting. So it could also go the other way around. And this is, for example, because growing economies attract more money. So R&D spending, both from inside the companies, but also maybe just foreign direct investments from other countries. We also know that growing economies are attractive for market entry. And the more companies enter the market, the more competition we observe. And in very competitive environments, we also see more strategic patenting. So patents filed for strategic reasons. Just think of the patent wars in the information communication industry, especially in the smartphone industry a few years ago. And last but not least, if an economy is rich, they also have more resources to invest in R&D or in education as well. And if nationalities or economies invest in education, then they create more highly skilled people, and they eventually then become inventors and create inventions which then will be patented. So the learning from this is the causality is probably two-sided. So patents lead to investment in R&D, which finally leads to economic growth, but economic growth also leads to patenting, which means that we need both. We need patents, but we also need R&D spending. And this is why in the second part of our report, we summarize policy instruments which foster both R&D or intellectual property rights. And of course, we cannot give you a full list of these policy instruments. Not even in the report we can provide a full list, even though you find more instruments in the report than on this slide. So this is just an overview of very common policy instruments. And we sort them into 4 categories. One is direct incentives, and the second category is indirect incentives. And then we also distinguish between R&D incentives and incentives for intellectual property rights. So again, to just give a few examples, direct incentives for R&D are tax incentives, so allowance or deductions of taxes, or direct funding, such as government subsidies, for example, or research grants at universities. Direct incentives for intellectual property rights could be reductions in fees, for example, for small and medium-sized companies, but also the so-called patent box regimes, where companies are allowed to reduce their corporate taxes for income derived from patented inventions. Then we have indirect incentives, such as infrastructure or resources. And here one could think of technology parks, maybe, or labs. Knowledge is and networking is an important factor or an indirect incentive. And here one could just think of publicly available databases, such as the ESPASNet database of the European Patent Office, or patent views of the US Patent Office. And last but not least, indirect incentives for intellectual property rights. Here one could think of strong patent systems, for example, or cross-border IP protection. Thereby we mean PCT applications, to give an example. Or we could also just think of IP education or awareness. And here one could name as an example the European Patent Academy, which creates this awareness and offers training courses to foster IP education. Again, just a few examples, and there's much more than just this. The problem, of course, is, as always, these incentives or policy instruments come with pros and cons. And if you just focus on the direct incentives and just give a few examples, then you will immediately understand what the issue is. So let's start again with tax incentives. So what we know from empirical research, if you look at the data, if you look at the evaluation of these mechanisms, then we see, yes, tax incentives increase R&D spending, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, we also see that tax incentives could lead to a relabeling of non-R&D expenditures to R&D expenditures to get the tax reductions, or to a relocation of R&D activities or IP royalties to so-called tax havens. Second, government subsidies or research grants lead to more patents, which again is a good thing. But you also see in empirical research that public R&D funding is a substitute, at least in part, for private R&D. And that's, of course, not what we want, because then in the end, we do not get more. We just get the substitute for private investments. And we also see that these subsidies only have a very small effect on the quality of the patents. So a huge effect on the quantity, but a small effect on the quality. And this gets even worse if we look at reduction of patent fees, because there we also see a huge increase in the number of patents, but we even see a decrease in the quality. And this tells us that companies with important technology probably file a patent anyways. But if you reduce the fees, then things that would otherwise not have been patented are patented, and these are typically of lower quality. And the last one in my list are so-called innovation vouchers for small and medium-sized companies. These are programs where small and medium-sized companies get money to buy expert knowledge, for example, or to use R&D facilities. And here we also find a positive effect on innovation, but unfortunately, this is only a short-term effect. So the effect fades out after only 2 years. And this is also something we have to take into account, because in the end, we do not want to subsidize companies forever. We want a long-term effect. So far, what is our learning? The learning is, first of all, that we need both R&D and patents. There are a lot of policy instruments out there, and they work, but they come with pros and cons. In the end, what we need is probably a mix of different policy measures, and we have to use and create them wisely, and we have to evaluate them from time to time on a regular basis at best, in order to find out whether they work or not. And of course, this is not part of our report, but it should be mentioned at this point. We need more than just policy measures, because policy measures are not enough. So we also need maybe something like less regulation, less bureaucracy. We need investment in the skills of the people. We need a culture of failure in innovation, where most of the innovations fail anyways. And then, of course, the bundle will be the success. And now I hand over to Leo to present our own results.
Yeah, thank you, Karin, and also a warm welcome from my side. I will continue with the empirical part of our report. And to move forward, yes. So to also empirically answer this question, how does technological innovation relate to economic growth? We created a sample of 26 OECD countries and China between 2000 and 2021 and looked at the relationship of the patent stock of these countries with economic growth in these countries for each of these 21 years in our sample. And to create this patent stock, we identified all patent applications filed by applicants from a specific country. And then we analyzed the correlation between different dimensions of this patent stock with economic growth here measured in year-to-year growth in real GDP per capita. And if we look at this regression table here, we basically focus on the first 5 coefficients. I will highlight them for you to be able to follow me more easily. We will start with model 2. Model 1 is just a baseline model. For details, I refer to the report. Model 2 regresses the number of economic growth on the number of patent applications. So this is just the conditional correlation between patent applications and economic growth. And we do not find, at least in the sample that we look at, a statistically significant effect. So the sheer amount of patent applications does not seem to relate with economic growth. Now, when we move to the next 4 models, starting with model 3, we adjust this patent stock for some value or quality dimensions. The first one is we only consider granted patent applications. And here we already find that this effect now is positive and statistically significant. Moving to model 4, we only consider granted applications with at least 2 family members. Here the idea is if you file a patent in multiple jurisdictions, which will lead to more family members in the patent family, this is an indication of patent or innovation value. And here indeed we find that also the effect now is even more positive, still statistically significant. Then next, moving to model 5, we adjust the patent stock to patent applications with at least 1 forward citation within the first 5 years. Again, forward citations here as an indicator that the underlying invention has some value and influences also follow-on inventions. And lastly, we only consider patents that are protecting radical inventions. And we find for this measure the most positive and the still statistically significant effect on economic growth. So reflecting on these first models and first results, the bottom line is that while we do not find a relationship between the number of applications and economic growth, we find a positive and statistically significant effect for patent quality or value adjusted measures of technological innovation, suggesting that it's not just the amount of innovation, but also the quality of innovation that matters for economic growth. Karin also alluded to this reverse causality, that it's not only technological innovation leading to economic growth, but also the other way around, which is what we tested in model 7, where we switched the dependent and independent variables. So we predicted technological innovation by economic growth in the previous period, which is the coefficient I'm highlighting here now. And we did not find a positive and statistically significant effect. However, if we look at the economic level or the economic prosperity of a country, here proxied by real GDP, we find this positive relationship between economic prosperity and technological innovation. So what we did here in this analysis, we pooled basically all patents in these countries. And what we then wanted to do in a final step of our analysis is to focus on 2 technology areas where we think that play a crucial role in the years and the decades to come, which are sustainable technologies, which is basically anything related to combating climate change, and artificial intelligence. And here we stick to a purely descriptive analysis and first look at sustainable technologies and the share of patents filed by a country that is related to sustainable technology. So here, if we look at the very first column, the one on the left, we see that in Latvia, roughly 30% of patent applications filed after 2000 relate or protect inventions related to sustainable technology. Then if we look at other countries, we have picked 5 countries which we look at in more detail. China, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and the US from left to right here at the bottom, highlighted with the red boxes. We see that in China, for example, still 17% of all patents filed after 2000, patent applications filed after the year 2000 relate to sustainable technologies. So already here we see there's quite some variance in where these countries tend to focus on. US here rather lagging behind, while Germany and France are somewhere in the middle with roughly 10% of the patent stock relating to sustainable technologies. And if we now even zoom into these 5 countries more and look at only those patents protecting sustainable technologies, which other subfields they relate to, we see also some interesting patterns. I would like to highlight 2 now. One is in Germany and France, we have quite a lot of patents protecting sustainable technologies that are also related to transportation. This is maybe as expected given the importance of the car industry in these 2 countries. It also shows that the legacy and the industry composition obviously plays an important role also in where the future is headed. For the US, we see that the green box is disproportionately represented, which is representing technologies related to ICT. Now, when we move to this heat map now, we see quite an interesting pattern. I think this looks like quite a lot of information, so let me walk you through what we see on what we did here. So we have basically ranked all countries in our sample according to different dimensions. Let's first look and focus on the column to the left, which is just representing the total number of patent applications ranked from highest to lowest. We see that China is ranked first. This means China has filed by far most patent applications in our country, in our sample. But then when we move to the columns that are on the right, which represent the quality or value adjusted outcomes, we see that this ranking reverses. So when we, for example, focus on the average number of 5-year forward citations, China is no longer ranked first, it's ranked 27th in our sample. So it's actually quite near the bottom of the list in terms of quality adjusted patent applications. And this is to highlight basically that quality and quantity are not necessarily aligned. Actually, it's quite diverse. So countries that are ranked high in terms of quantity are pretty often ranked low in quality, which is also maybe highlighting if you look at the European countries like Germany, France, and the Netherlands, they are not very high or good, so to say, in quantity, but they seem to do okay in terms of quality. The US, for example, is also among the patents filed by US applicants, the ones that are being cited most, which is an indication that maybe the technological innovation originating from the US has important influence on other innovations in sustainable technologies. Now, we did a very similar exercise for artificial intelligence, again, starting with the share of patents from each of these countries related to AI. Here, Israel is the country that is seemingly quite far ahead in terms of the share. Ireland, sorry, IE is Ireland, in terms of the share of patents protecting AI relative to the entire patent stock. Again, Karin talked about firms relocating R&D and maybe also for tax reasons. I think part of that is maybe what we can see here with Ireland being so prominent. Other countries, again, China, also quite high share of patents protecting AI, and here the European countries seem to be somewhat behind when we look at the shares at the bottom, and especially for Germany and France. And we also made the same heat map again for all countries in our sample, and we see very similar pictures. So quantity and quality are not necessarily aligned. China again leading by far in the terms of the number of patent applications. US ranked second here, and the US also seems to do quite well in terms of quality. So in AI, the US seems to be quite good in both quality and quantity dimensions, whereas China, similarly to sustainable technologies, is very good. Has a lot of is good in the terms of the number of patent applications, but not if we consider patent quality adjusted counts. Okay, so let us maybe come to a conclusion here. First of all, I think our report shows, also by reviewing the relevant literature, that the relationship between APR and economic growth is two-sided. So we have this, the causality going from technological innovation to economic growth, but also in the other way. And I think this two-sided causality is also a good sign of that it's a very, very important relationship that we need to consider when we think about economic prosperity and the future competitiveness of Europe and the economy in general. We also find that it's not the quality of patents that is positively correlated with annual growth, but rather the value of the patents. It is difficult, at least from our review of the policy instruments, to draw conclusions about which policy mechanism works best. Also because first, it's was not the goal of our report, but another issue is that policy measures are often introduced simultaneously, also at different levels. If you consider, for example, European countries, you often have EU policies and then national policies being introduced in parallel, which makes it difficult to evaluate these measures. Still, from our review, I think it became clear that most of the policies that we at least reviewed seem to focus on quantity of output and innovation rather than the quality, which is given the finding that quality is the more important dimension for economic growth, something we should carefully reconsider. When we look at two key technologies of the future, sustainable technology and AI, we see that in terms of numbers and quantity, China seems to be far ahead. But in terms of the other dimensions we looked at, not necessarily. So the average quality of these patents seems to be rather low. When we look in the European context, we found that the Nordic countries seems to perform quite well in terms of the patent quality indicators. Now, from these findings, we can draw a couple of implications. Again, stressing this quantity versus quality dimension, we advocate for nuanced policy making that is not only incentivizing the creation of a lot of innovations, but rather also consider the quality and the value of these innovations that are being generated. The two-sided causality between technological innovation and economic growth suggests that a thriving economy is not only an important outcome for its own, but also important to drive future innovation. So this is like a reinforcing circle. We also find that internationalization is something that should be considered maybe even more, because it's not technological innovation cannot be conceived at the national level. We have these knowledge spillovers and knowledge sharing across borders, and we also need it for innovation and technological progress. And finally, we can, again, turning to the Nordic countries, which showed quite good indicators in our analysis, maybe learn from them and use them as role models in order to better understand what policy instruments can be implemented to ensure that this quality and quantity trade-off, that these both quality and quantity dimensions are being incentivized. And now I come to the end of our presentation. Thank you for your attention. We look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Karin and Leo, for this very interesting presentation. First things first, because I read the paper, I know the answer to this question that we have received several times. What is a radical invention?
Okay, if I may, I would maybe answer this question in two dimensions. First, focusing on the empirical dimension, how did we measure it? And then maybe what does it mean? So to empirically measure a radical invention, we focus on the technology classes a patent is being assigned to, and we identify a patent as radical if it is assigned to a combination of technology classes that have never been combined before. So assume there's a patent that is being assigned to technology class A, B, and C. If A, B, and C have never before been combined on a focal patent, this would be a radical invention. If A and B had been combined on a previous, A, B, and C had been combined on a previous patent, it would not have been considered a radical invention. This is a measure that we have taken from the literature on radical inventions, and which has also been shown to correlate with patent value. So, for example, the number of forward citations and also the dollar value of the underlying invention. What does it mean conceptually? A radical invention is an invention of something that is completely new in a way that the knowledge that is being recombined has not existed before. And oftentimes this can be related to disruption or disruptive innovation, but it can also relate or result in failure. So it's not the uncertainty of the invention is also higher on average, because it can either be a complete breakthrough or it can be a complete failure because it is so radical in its novelty.
And if I may add an example, because it's always easy to get it from an example. So we typically distinguish between incremental innovation, which is just a further improvement of existing technology, and radical innovation, which means a new technology. And an example for an incremental innovation would be a smartphone, a cell phone with a better battery. The battery then has just a longer lifetime, for example. And a radical innovation would be the switch from a cell phone to a smartphone. That is the difference.
Okay, very useful. Thank you very much. First question that is more substantial. Given the positive correlation between the number of valuable patents and economic growth, would you say that strong patent systems are a key to economic growth?
Yes and no would be the answer. So the point is, a strong patent system is needed to provide incentives in the first place. Because if no company has an incentive to invest in R&D because it's not protected and therefore can be copied by others, then innovation is only possible if the government subsidizes it. So yes, we need a strong patent system in the first place. But on the other hand, we also know that strong patent systems can prevent follow-up inventions. So it's always the question of which perspective we take. So do we take the perspective of the first mover, or the first one who creates a technology? Then it's definitely a pure incentive and it works very well. In some industries more than in others. So in pharmaceuticals, it's more important than in ICT, because ICT is very fast moving. So patents might not be as valuable as in pharmaceuticals, but still it provides an incentive. But if we take the perspective of the follower, the one who needs to build on the technology, and then there is this exclusion right, then too strong patent systems can also harm innovation. And this is something, of course, that has to be balanced by the patent system itself, to balance these two forces in order to maximize innovation.
That's
Maybe
very good.
a good example that you also have on your website on a policy that can help maybe handle this trade-off is the friend agreement, or the friend, where you basically find a way where you still make the underlying invention available to the users at a reasonable and fair price, while still having a robust and maybe strong protection for the underlying invention.
Okay. That's very interesting. And so your paper is more or less limited to patents, because you have to scope it. But do you think that your results could be generalized to other type of IPRs?
Yes, I think so, even though with a number of limitations. I mean, we talk about technological innovation, and technology is protected by patents, or maybe it's, if we talk about software, then with copyright. Trademarks, for example, they do not protect technology. They more or less protect markets. They protect brands and thereby markets, secure markets. And but this also creates an incentive for innovation. It's just a different type of incentive. And if you look at pharmaceutical companies, for example, or also the automotive companies, they do not just need patents. They definitely need patents as well, but also other types of intellectual property rights. So the pills also need a name and a brand, and this has to be protected with trademarks. Or in the automotive industry, then the shape of the car is protected with a design because it cannot be patented. So in the end, the best thing is to combine different property rights to create the optimal incentive. Also, patents expire after 20 years, and then companies like Lego, for example, they are left with trademark protection because that's all they have, because the technology is not protectable anymore unless they create something new. So yes, as long as the property rights, the different types of property rights create incentives to invest in innovation, and it does not necessarily have to be technological innovation, could also be business model innovation or the like, then we see similar effects.
Okay. What should the EU do to remain or become competitive in future key technologies, such as AI or sustainable technologies, in your opinion?
So I think the report shows quite well that there's no easy answer to this question, because the policies act at so different levels, and they also have interactions. But I think we can maybe draw a few conclusions. This is actually also a question that we started out with. What do we, looking ahead, what should Europe do? And we think that most importantly, they should enhance and create an environment that fosters investments in R&D. And here we have seen a recent example in the US, where they have the Chips and Science Act, which is in an unforeseen volume, puts money into these key technology areas of the future, in artificial intelligence and the chips industry, and the computer semiconductor industry. And we think that something similar in Europe is also warranted, just to make sure that we are not losing behind, and that we also remain and keep the ability to stay innovative in these sectors, because you also need a certain knowledge stock in order to be able to compete in this race. We also think that just investing a lot of money is not enough. You also need to create an environment that is generally conducive to innovation, and that stimulates knowledge sharing, that stimulates cross-border collaboration between European countries. And this education and training will be needed also at basic levels. When we look at our universities, when we look at our schools, we need the basic skills that is needed to also develop and drive these key technologies in the future. And they need to become integral parts of our education, because only if we have the human skills and the human capital that allows us to create these innovations, we can keep up. And I think these could be 3 examples. I'm not sure, Karin, if you have anything to add.
Maybe one thing is to stimulate competition, because typically competition also leads to innovation. And if you just look at recent legal regulations, like, for example, the EU Digital Markets Act, I mean, of course, it remains to be seen whether it works or not, but that goes in the direction, right, to create fair and competitive digital markets, and also allow the smaller companies to enter the market. Because in the end, I mean, most of the radical innovations, again, come from startups. And this means that we also have to foster entrepreneurship. And if the market is taken by 3 or 4 big companies, and there's no room for market entry by startups, then this will not work. So I think that it goes in the right direction, but again, it has to be validated and evaluated whether the measures that are taken really help and are really effective.
Okay. At one point in your presentation, you referred to the Nordic countries. So the question that we receive is, do you know what incentive policies the Nordic countries have that other major countries do not have?
Do not have?
Yes, because you indicated that the Nordic countries, I think it was related to the sustainable technologies.
No, I think that the Nordic countries are different in various ways. So if we look at the policy instruments, then they're very similar in these countries. And that is exactly one of our outcomes, that if we just look at these policy instruments, then, you know, there's hardly any difference between the countries. I mean, there's, you know, one missing in one country and one in another, but in the end, it's the same. So the question is, how do they use these instruments and what else do they do? So this is the question. And here the Nordic countries are special. So if you look at digitalization, I mean, the Nordic countries have long started to invest in digitalization, long before all other European countries have even thought about it. Or the renewable energy and sustainable technology. I mean, if you look at the Nordic countries, and I know the Danes quite well because I have a part-time job in Denmark, and for them, the work-life balance is so important, even though they are super productive, but they just have a different way of working. And this also means that, you know, if you spend more time outside, then you care about the environment more than others who are just inside. And this means that they also invest more in the protection of the environment. And this, of course, over the time, this just adds up. And then there is another thing that the bureaucracy, the level of bureaucracy is much lower in the Nordic countries. And they share data very openly. So everybody knows, I mean, that's not the secret to success, but everybody knows what the colleagues, even the bosses earn, right? So they do not really want to, I mean, data protection is important, don't get me wrong. And it's good that we have these legal regulations, but there's always too much. And at a certain point, if you no longer share important information in order to create innovation, then at least you slow down things a lot, because everybody has to start from the scratch. And these are a few things. And then I think it's not just one measure that works or doesn't work. It is the combination of all these different measures and also the mentality of the people there.
You mostly replied to my following question, which is dedicated to the African continent. And the question was, what is the best model that Africa could adopt? Because from your experience, IP is still at its infancy, largely in Africa. So, okay, that's a continent, and countries might be different, but do you have any advice from what you have learned in your study?
In terms of the general environment for innovation or specific to the patent system?
I believe the question is more for the patent system.
I think one key element that also came out of the discussion that we had with you while writing the report is that we need to be able to plan. So we need to reduce the uncertainty that is related to enforcing and setting up the patent system. So I think one important step would definitely be, no matter now whether you make the system very strict or very protective or rather loose, it needs to be a system that everyone understands and everyone adheres to. So it needs to be a system that companies can use to plan their moves and also to invest the money, because we know every time you invest in an innovation project, it can go wrong. And you need to make sure that if it goes right, then you are also able to get the benefits in order for you to be able to pay all the losses that you had with the projects that didn't work out. So I think the ability to plan and have certain rules that everyone sticks to is a crucial part.
Yeah, something else that comes, because we will not change the patent system in Africa, and also not in any other countries within the short run, at least. So this takes time, if it is possible at all. And I'm not even sure whether this is, unfortunately, this is one of their first priorities. So, but what is an important aspect in any case is learning or trainings, creating an awareness for IP, because that's, I mean, the IP system might not be strong, but there is an IP system, and many companies might not even know about it, and they don't even know what to do. And also, I mean, there are international treaties, like, right, and many people might not even know what opportunities they have. So creating awareness, providing trainings to get people a better understanding what is there and what isn't, and how to deal with it, because that's in the end what they have to do. They have to work with what they have, and they have, and if they learn how to use or how to play the IP game, then they might be better off. And this is, of course, as I said before, the European Patent Academy, they provide trainings for Europe. But of course, there are also other examples in other countries, and for IP is a perfect example, because if you look at watch the videos and you read the report, you get a better understanding. And should you have something especially dedicated to the African countries, then this would definitely be of great help.
Okay, now I have a tricky question. So in Europe, do incentive policies have more sense at the EU level or at the national level? From what you have seen?
That is very difficult to answer. So we do not have evidence, empirical evidence, to kind of give you a clear answer. I mean, we can only speculate based on what we know and what we read. And I mean, the point here is that if we talk about Europe or EU countries, then on the one hand, we talk about Germany and France, for example, or the Netherlands. And on the other hand, we talk about countries like Estonia and Romania. And of course, we cannot mix the two and say that, you know, there is one universal remedy for both of them. So I think that companies like with a strong IP and strong national IP system, and sometimes the German national IP system is even stronger than the EU or the EP system, which becomes visible once companies file an EP patent plus a German national patent. Then, of course, you could say maybe they could do without the European help, even though I'm not even sure about that. But for sure, the small countries can't. And they probably profit more from what they get from Europe. And you know, if they have a strong European patent system, if they do not have a strong national patent system. And I mean, I do not only want to mention companies like Romania. We could also mention Italy as an example, where you know, patent renewals, you go to the post office, buy a stamp, and you know, this is not comparable to a country like France, for example, where everything is very well structured, and there the EU system certainly helps a lot, but it does not work without national policy measures as well. Because in the end, that's where the companies, many of the companies do most of their business or do their R&D if they do not send it to other countries.
Very clear. How will recent trends towards nationalism and protectionism, such as America First, will change the implications of your report?
So I think the report shows that you cannot, I mean, you should not think of this in nationalistic, purely in nationalistic terms. But if there's no alternative, like if all the other countries around you start to do that, I think you have to reduce risks and dependencies. And this means that if we have this movement, I think Europe should not focus on doing Europe first now, but they certainly need to react when the supply chain depends on countries that act in such a way. This means they need to be able to have the capabilities that they depend on from the outside now in the inside. This means even more investments in own technological capabilities and own R&D activities. And yeah, sort of make them independent from the outside knowledge, but also resources that is needed in order to keep innovating.
I mean, we have to kind of increase resilience, kind of, or you know, and Europe has to be able to help itself if they have to, and it's not only because of nationalism; it's also because of the current geopolitical risks, and you know, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of recent changes, and therefore it is important to be able to help yourself. But on the other hand, what our report shows and what also the literature shows very clearly is that knowledge exchange, or we call it knowledge spillovers, are important. And if we all keep in our countries and we all keep amongst ourselves, even within the boundaries of our companies, then and no longer exchange knowledge, then this is very harmful for innovation. Because most of the innovations that we see on the market, and I would say probably even 90%, are the outcome of a combination of existing knowledge, not something totally new. I mean, there are examples for something that is totally new, like, for example, 3D printing. But if you just take other examples like internet banking, I mean, banking was there, the internet was there, and you combined it and created internet banking. That was an innovation at that time, and even a radical innovation for this sector. So if we think of innovation as a combination of existing knowledge or existing technology components, then if we cannot exchange knowledge across borders, then we sooner or later run out of new combinations. And this leads to a huge duplication of work also. And therefore, it is not just the resources, it is, or yes, knowledge is also a resource, but it's also about knowledge exchange. And therefore, it, you know, areas like the Silicon Valley are so important, where so many companies from the same industry sit very close together, and they just meet each other over coffee and talk, and thereby exchange knowledge and create innovation. Actually, and this is something that is destroyed with this new developments.
In one of the projects we are currently working on, we actually characterize the landscape of the AI research. And we find that the research that is most influential and most valuable is the research by people from different countries. Just to stress this point. So the international collaboration is crucial and important to produce this high quality, high value innovation. So it's definitely not in our interest to isolate ourselves, given everything that we just discussed.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Okay, so the fragmentation is definitely not serving the purpose, but maybe we are going the right direction. Would your report suggest that the unitary patent introduced by the EPO in 2023 will help European countries grow economically?
Again, we will have to speculate because we are not able to evaluate the policy yet. We have a couple of indications that this is quite a good incentive. So, for example, a key point is reducing bureaucracy. This maybe also relates back to the question you had on the different regulation system at the national and the EU level. If we're able to reduce bureaucracy, which this the unitary patent promises to do, then this is definitely a good thing. And we also did some calculations where, or we adopted some calculations where we show that if companies wanted to file individual patents in all member states, this would be more expensive than having the UP, which also reduces costs, which is also a good thing, because then it even more incentivizes firms to file IP protection. It also gives a certain standard and legal certainty for the companies across the European countries, which is also a good thing. So I would say at the current point in time, most arguments speak in favor of the UP, but it still remains to be evaluated empirically. At least we were not able to do so.
Yeah, and of course there are also a few voices which see this more critical, because they say, first of all, the EU patent or the unitary patent is only cheaper if you validate your patent in more than 4 countries. And if you are just interested in Germany, France, and Italy, for example, then it's still cheaper to go for the bundle. Or it's also that at the Max Planck Institute, the group of Dietmar Haarhoff, they conducted first empirical analysis on who uses the unitary patent, and they found that large companies with very important patent, and also the pharmaceutical industries, they tend to be very careful about using it. Let me put it that way. And one of the possible reasons for that could be that if the patent is challenged in court and the other party wins, then the whole patent is gone. Whereas in the European patent system, you had to challenge the patent separately in all jurisdictions. This can be very expensive, first of all, and thereby scare people away from that. And also, if you lose the patent in one country, it does not mean that you lose it in all countries. And that's something you have to think about. And therefore, it will be very interesting to see how this develops. If it turns out to be a stronger, more reliable patent protection, and also cheaper, especially for small and medium-sized companies, maybe if they also get the subsidies on top, then yes, it can foster economic growth. If the disadvantages become more important, and some of the most active patenters didn't even adopt the system for whatever reason, then not.
And that's a good thing that you are raising, critics, because I have a dedicated question about critics regarding the patent system. So critics argue that strict enforcement of IPRs can limit access to important innovations. as was often argued in the case of the COVID vaccine, for example, a few years ago. So could strong IP protection also hinder the spread of sustainable technologies and slow our progress in the fight against climate change?
I mean, as we said before, so a too strong patent system, which, and again, it's this, core innovation versus follow-up invention. If you're the one who produces the core invention, then you're happy with a strong patent system. If you're the one with the follow-up invention, you're probably not so happy. But if we compare the two cases, the COVID vaccine and sustainability, then of course we have to, differentiate between, for example, different industries. I mean, vaccine, this is pharmaceutical industry. And in the pharmaceutical industry, we call it discrete technologies, which means that one patent protects one product. And if you have the patent, you're almost a monopolist. And this is, of course, different in sustainable technology. So there we call it a discrete technology, which means that one product is protected by a huge number of patents. And therefore, there's more need for collaboration, there's more need for exchange of knowledge, and the dynamics are totally different. So this is one thing. The other thing is that what really slows down the protection of the environment is the use of this technology. And this is, I mean, of course, it is, if we can improve the technology, it is even better. But currently, if we look at what is missing is resistance to using the technology, to switching to electric cars, for example, or to use technology which reduces the emissions. And this is not necessarily an issue of making the next invention. This is more about licensing in the technology and using it in your own products. And this is a totally different question, even though, and honestly, it is very unlikely that it is in the interest of the companies not to license their technologies. So therefore, I would say that the risk is not as high in an industry like in the sustainable industry, like compared to the pharmaceutical industry, because pharmaceutical is just so special. And this is probably also the reason why we have compulsory licenses in pharmaceuticals, but not in sustainable technology.
Okay, we just have almost 2 minutes to conclude. So here's the last question. 7 of the 10 largest companies in the world are technology companies, and 6 of these 7 technology companies are based in the US. These companies are also likely to dominate the AI market and cement the US competitive advantage in the coming decades. Does Europe have a chance to catch up?
You see these statistics a lot, and I think at the moment this is how it looks like, and the monopoly that these big companies, the big US tech companies, the monopoly power that they have is certainly something that we should think of, and which might also threaten our ability here in Europe to develop key capabilities in these technology areas. But then if you look at a very recent example, OpenAI, which is a very, very small firm and has managed to disrupt this disrupt this market in an unforeseen fashion, this also should give us hope. I mean, of course, now this is also a US company, but it shows that you can disrupt these markets if you have the people and the ideas and the innovations that will determine how these markets look like. And I think we should rather not be too pessimistic, but rather think about how we can create such companies here in Europe. And this needs to be supported by an environment that is fostering and inviting these companies to grow here locally. And this is what we should think of and care of. And I think then if we used it as a chance, this is still early in the AI industry, we can certainly catch up. My positive European citizen view.
Yep. I agree to everything the US just said, and this again brings me to startups. We need to foster entrepreneurship. We need more startups in Europe. We need to provide the environment, the money, also venture capital, business angel money, and so on, funding in general to help startups grow. Because we have innovative people, we have well-educated people, we attract people from even from outside Germany or outside Europe, but we have to provide them with an environment that fosters entrepreneurship.
I like your optimism. I like it really much because, you know, at 4IP, we receive lots of questions from SMEs and startups. And each time at the end, I have to remind them, that's great to innovate, but please, please file patents to protect your innovation, because most of the times they just ignore it. But now we are getting to the closure of this webinar. And I have to say, this topic is really fascinating. And I suppose we could discuss for hours, you know, trying to include more criticism, to try to see fragmentation against, you know, something more harmonized. And I would like to thank you very much, Karin and Leo, for your knowledge, for sharing all of this in your paper that is about to be published on the website of our IP Council. And your expertise is very valuable. So thank you so much. I would like to thank our attendees today for your questions. I know we were not able to take all the questions, but we will try our best, you know, to publish everything on the website. The recording of this presentation will be made available on the 4IP Council's website tomorrow. And don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to find out about the future webinars, the next research papers, podcast episodes, and everything that we are creating. Please use the QR code that you can see on your screen, and you will be able to subscribe right away. So thank you again, Karin, Leo, and I wish you a very good end of the day.